Okay, it looks like it's 12 o'clock Central Time, 1 o'clock Eastern Time, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. Saltillo is excited to introduce our guest speakers, Dr. Jill Senner and Matt Baud, and their presentation, Communication Partner Instruction in AAC. My name is Lisa Tim, and I will be your moderator. A little housekeeping to get started. Everyone is muted for the presentation to eliminate feedback and distractions. You will see a material section in the toolbar where you can download the handout for today, as well as your ASHA documents. You will also receive these handouts in a follow-up email. We will take questions at the end of the presentation. You can chat your questions in at any time. If we are unable to get to all the questions during the time we have, we will compile them and send a follow-up email with the answers. This course is approved for 1 hour of ASHA credit. Your attendance is timestamped through the GoToTraining site. You must be on the entire hour in order to receive ASHA credit. Please follow the directions provided in the materials section to submit your ASHA participation form. And now with that, I will go ahead and turn the presentation over to Matt and Jill. I'll make you presenter.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jill Senner.
And I'm Matthew Baud.
Welcome to Communication Partner Instruction in AAC. We have a couple of disclosures that we need to mention. Firstly, the financial disclosure. I am the owner and director of Technology and Language Center Incorporated, and Matt owns a private practice, and both of us actually spend a significant portion of our time engaged in communication partner instruction, training communication partners to do a variety of things that are considered evidence-based, such as model on communication devices. We have no relevant non-financial relationships to report.
The expected outcomes for attendees today include participants will identify 3 benefits of communication partner instruction, and participants will identify at least 3 components of successful communication partner training programs.
So why are we so focused on communication partners? Why do we spend so much of our time in practice educating communication partners? Well, communication involves 2 or more persons, and both the individual using AAC as well as the communication partner need to adapt to the skills and needs of each other for the interaction to be successful.
And it's been suggested that the success of a communication interaction between an AAC user and a communication partner will depend heavily on the skills of the communication partner.
Research indicates that training an AAC user's significant communication partners, such as parents, teachers, teachers' aides, friends, siblings, can be of great benefit in, quote, promoting greater participation in daily interactions by people who use AAC systems.
Recent analyses of communication partner training programs suggest that there is consistent evidence that the communication partner instruction not only improves the skills of communication partners, but also has a positive impact on communication of people who use AAC.
And here are really a couple of very interesting quotes from the Kent-Walsh et al. 2015 study on communication partner instruction. The first is that communication partner instruction can be an effective intervention component for individuals with complex communication needs.
And partner instruction should be viewed as an integral part of an AAC system and intervention. Provision of instruction should be routinely provided.
And I think over the last 20 years of practice, we've really shifted how we've done things. Once upon a time, people would come in and say, we want therapy for Johnny. And Johnny would come for 1 session a week, 2 sessions a week, sometimes even 3 sessions a week. But we didn't always see the type of generalization that we would have hoped for. And over time, as we begin to incorporate educating school staff and also families and how to incorporate the communication device into their natural environments, we're really seeing much better outcomes.
And supporting children who are learning language using an AAC system requires the adult to have specific skills in the communication mode. The second one is in addition to having strategies for modeling And third, responding to the children's communication.
Being an effective communication partner or AAC facilitator is not intuitive. It often requires one to change long-established unconscious ways of communicating. And I've had a lot of families tell me that they have adapted strategies for communicating with their children that occurred long before getting any type of augmentative communication. Maybe they adapted by asking lots of yes/no questions. Maybe they adapted by reading nonverbal communication and gestures. And when they got the communication system, it really required them to make a shift in how they were communicating with their child. And we'll actually get to see some of these comments later on from our parent instruction study.
And if we look at school staff involvement in AAC, the kids spend about 30 hours a week attending school, making those school staff members, the teachers, paraprofessionals, other related staff members, key communication partners in the educational environment.
But what do we know about school staff? Well, according to the 2016 ASHA School Survey, approximately 55% of school SLPs regularly serve students who are using AAC.
However, many SLPs and special education teachers may graduate from pre-service training with minimum or no exposure to AAC.
ATIA conducted a study in 2012 of US-based speech-language pathologists, and they found that 74% of respondents felt like they lacked adequate preparation in AAC and assistive technology.
Thus, classroom staff are likely to acquire professional development opportunities to further knowledge and skills in AAC.
But what about the home environment?
The primary interventions in implementing AAC are often the parents, and the primary context for evaluating the effects of AAC intervention is the family. Parents and siblings are not only the interventionists, but they're also important interaction partners of the child who requires AAC.
So let's take a look at some of the research that has been done on parent involvement in AAC. Mothers and fathers rated the need for increasing knowledge of assistive devices as a priority.
Family satisfaction has been found to increase when clinicians recognize parent needs regarding AAC.
Parent and family support has been identified as a contributor to positive outcomes for individuals who use AAC.
Parent training in AAC has been linked to positive changes in children's communication.
Parent-implemented naturalistic behavioral interventions such as Jasper, combined with use of a speech-generating device, resulted in improvements in spontaneous communicative utterances, novel words, and comments.
And parent training in AAC has been shown to increase family comfort level with operating in SGD and in supporting communication.
Problems may occur when families are not provided training on ways to integrate the use of the assistive device in naturally occurring activities. As a result, the device may be seen as a burden as opposed to a facilitative tool to increase participation of their child in daily activities. And this is so important. I see that there are some family members who are participating in today's webinar. Welcome. We know that when we give you families homework, that sometimes that can seem like a burden to some families. Families have very busy lives. Children might have other therapies in addition to speech, physical therapy, occupational therapy. There are extracurricular activities, there's soccer, there's baseball. And if we can't find a way to use the augmentative communication device in naturally occurring, already occurring home activities, that can really seem like extra work instead of naturalistic communication.
So let's talk about what we know about partner trainings. Those traditional training strategies, those in-services that we in the schools know so much as Institute Day or early release, or for those families that get to attend maybe an after-school training or get to pop in really fast midday to learn how to use the device in a quick shot, those really are frequently insufficient in helping communication partners develop the expertise they need to support long-term communication needs.
And evaluations of professional development suggest that as few as 10% of participants who attended a single in-service style training implemented what they learned. We really need a lot more than just a single webinar or a single in-service to actually be able to use the information in a meaningful way in our daily lives.
So here's a quote that we love by Jim Knight. We wouldn't teach someone to drive by giving them a lecture, tossing them a book, and then turning them loose on the freeway. Nonetheless, when we provide traditional staff development in schools, that is pretty much what we do.
And I love this quote by Fixon: the train and hope approach to implementation does not appear to work.
That is because teaching is not talking and learning is not listening.
No, indeed. There's a lot more that's involved in the learning process.
And many of you have a lot of experience. So in terms of looking at what are the purposes of training, you guys have experience of how to use AAC. So you may be here just to fine tune your present skills. However, we know paraprofessionals, parents, teachers, even some speech paths that just haven't had a lot of experience in AAC will be learning new skills. And that's going to require more intensive training than those that are just fine tuning.
So we can also look at the levels of impact of training. How is this in service, or how is any type of training going to affect an individual? Well, the first level is awareness, simply realizing the importance of a technique. The second level of impact is concepts and organized knowledge. This is understanding concepts and increasing knowledge. Concepts and organized knowledge alone will have little effect on changing behavior. Principles and skills are when we have tools and potential for action. And lastly, the application and problem solving level. This is really what we hope to achieve with all of our trainings. This is where individuals who participated in the trainings can transfer and use the skills learned alongside skills already in their repertoire. And I just want to point out the graphic on your screen because I think it's really a very perfect illustration to point out these different levels of impact. This is actually by Lucas Stuber, so I do appreciate this graphic by him. The first stage, he says, is unconscious incompetence. So people don't know what they're doing, but they're not aware that they don't know. So, but then they get to that aha, they get to that awareness level. But simply having that awareness level alone is not enough for people to transfer skills into the classroom. It's really only when they get to that top level, mastery or second nature, where people have that unconscious competence, where it just happens so naturally that they don't have to think about it anymore. That's that application and problem solving level.
Now let's look at training elements that are common in many trainings that we attend. 1, theory, strategy, description, understanding the rationale and that theory and that verbal description. And this really helps get people to that awareness level for fine tuning, as well as those that are learning new skills.
The second thing we see in many trainings are demonstration and modeling. This is live or videotaped enactment of a skill or strategy. This may be adequate for those who are fine tuning, but for new learning, it increases awareness and knowledge, but generally doesn't get those individuals to the application and problem solving level.
The third element we see a lot in trainings are practice, trying that new skill or strategy in those simulated conditions. And we know this is important because it improves those principles and skills for those that are fine tuning and learning those new skills. But what we have learned is that we may need up to 20 times to practice in those simulated conditions before we begin to transfer those skills.
Another training element that we frequently see is feedback. This is observing and providing an opportunity to reflect. This can be self-administered or given by peers or coaches. Feedback increases awareness and knowledge with new learning and can result in application for fine-tuning. However, feedback alone rarely results in permanent changes.
That fifth element is coaching, right? The live observation, that feedback cycle in those clinical situations. It can be done by peers, by supervisors, or as a consultant. And this is where we see those skills transfer to the natural environments, whether it's in the classroom or it's at home.
So Dunst and Trevette in 2012 looked at what training elements were associated with the most successful trainings. And the first thing that they noted is that the use of a combination of practices was associated with optimal learner outcomes.
And learning afforded in settings where there was an immediate opportunity to apply those newly acquired knowledge or skills was more effective than learning in settings where there were few or no such opportunities.
And effect sizes were more than twice as large when instruction or training was conducted in participants' work settings.
Most skills needed by successful practitioners can be introduced in training, but rarely, really, are learned on the job with the help of that consultant or coach.
And effective coaching depends on the availability of coaches who are expert in the content, techniques, and rationales of the program. So one of the things that we frequently train communication partners is partner-augmented input. So in order to be able to teach partner-augmented input, one has to be adept at providing it themselves. This graph is really eye-opening. This is actually was published in the Fixon article previously mentioned, but it was based on a study that was done by Joyce and Showers in 2002, where they actually looked at the training components that were included in a training and then the outcomes. And what you'll see is that if the training only contained theory and discussion, there was a 10% increase in knowledge, 5% in skill demonstration, but 0% use in the classroom. When demonstration and training was added to that, we saw increases in knowledge and skill demonstration, also when we added practice and feedback and training. However, even with the use of those, the use in the classroom was still extremely low. It wasn't until coaching in the classroom was added to training that we actually saw a significant inclusion of the use of the strategy in the classroom.
The last element is goal setting, and in combination with coaching, this can boost the effectiveness of training. And this is something we always ask when we are doing trainings to our attendees. What goals do you want to achieve?
In 2015, Carl Dunst reviewed a variety of existing in-service models and noted that a number of key features, quote, have been found to be associated with either both practitioner and student-child-family outcomes, end quote. The key features of evidence-based in-service professional development he identified were as follows.
Explicit explanation and illustration of the specific content, knowledge, and practice to be learned.
Active and job-embedded practitioner opportunities to learn to use a practice and engage in evaluation of their experiences.
Reflection.
Coaching, mentoring, or performance feedback by a professional development specialist.
Follow-up by the PD specialist.
And this is huge as well, sufficient duration and intensity. So learning opportunities are distributed over time, not just in a single in-service.
When the instructor acts as an information transmitter and participants are passive receptacles, data suggests that limited recall of information months or years later and an inability to reach that application and problem-solving level.
As Aristotle has said, anything that we have to learn, we learn by the actual doing of it. And actually, you can see from our graphic here, these are little empty heads being filled with information. We know none of you are little empty heads. We know that every single person who attends a training comes with their own experiences, their own background. And the goal of training is not to try to fill your head with information. It's to help you try to critically analyze the information that you're hearing and be able to incorporate it in your natural environments along with strategies that you already have in your repertoires.
And to continue on that, people learn what they study and practice.
Transfer of training is greatest when the training conditions are highly similar to those of the ultimate testing conditions.
So we talked about successful training elements for school programs, but what about those for parents? Well, 5 training programs have been commonly used and associated with successful parent training programs. These include verbal instruction and/or instruction manuals, in-live practice, role-playing, modeling by the trainer, and reviewing videos of the intervention being implemented.
Not surprisingly, parent education programs were also found to be of greater benefit when parents practice the skill they learned on their own children.
And just like we see in the schools, training is most effective when it is implemented in everyday, meaningful routines and activities.
So one of the things that I really want to point out about training is implementation fidelity. It has been well documented in many disciplines that major gaps exist between what is known as effective practices, so theory and science, and what is actually done, policy and practice.
The purpose of parent or school staff instruction is to teach the families and educators how to use evidence-based practices in AAC, such as partner-augmented input.
However, according to implementation science, high fidelity implementation of effective training practices, otherwise known as implementation fidelity, yields high fidelity implementation of evidence-based practices, otherwise known as intervention fidelity, which results in positive child outcomes.
Implementation features. Those practices used to train partners are as important as the intervention features to establish evidence-based practice.
So basically, to sum this up, how we teach is as important as what we teach. Very important for us to think about.
Here's a working instructional model that combines a lot of the training elements that we just discussed. This was done by Ellis et al. That was worked with adolescents that were struggling in schools.
And more recently, Kent-Walsh and McNaughton devised an 8-step instructional program for communication partners of those using AAC based on Ellis et al. And included the following elements.
Pretest and commitment to the instructional program.
Strategy description.
Strategy demonstration.
Verbal practice of strategy steps.
Control practice and feedback.
Advanced practice and feedback.
Post-test and commitment of long-term strategy use.
And generalization of targeted strategy use. So let's take a closer look at each of these and how we do these in our trainings.
So the first step is that pretest and the commitment. This is where the instructors take a baseline measure of the communication partner's spontaneous use of the targeted strategy and communicative participation of the individuals who use AAC in natural environments.
Instructors introduce the targeted strategy and the training protocol to communication partners. Instructions and communication partners discuss communication partners' pretest strengths and weaknesses in implementing the strategy.
And communication partners commit to participating in the instructional program in order to acquire the target strategy.
So let's talk about how we do each of these things that Kent-Walsh and McNaughton described in step 1. The first is pretest. This is really getting a clear picture of reality. What is currently happening in the natural environment?
And we can't stress how important this is. This really helps us set the next stage of the next steps that we're going to talk about. In the pretest, what we try to do first is we videotape that lesson or that interaction at home or in the classroom before the training begins.
And Knight suggests that when video is used within coaching, it's best if the teacher or parent and coach watch the video separately. So I watch the video for the individuals that I'm coaching. The individual watches it on their own, and then afterwards we both meet and we discuss.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how much did you incorporate the child's SUD into the lesson or activity?
What would have to change to make device use closer to a 10?
What would you be doing? What would the student be doing?
So the next step, also part of step 1, is commitment to training. And I liken this, for those of you who take yoga, to setting an intention. Every morning when I go to yoga class, the instructor says, What is it that you want to get out of being here today? What is your intention? And it really is thought-provoking. What is it that you want to gain out of being at today's training? You don't have to necessarily chime in, but think about it. What is it that you want to gain from the training? When we set an intention and set goals for ourselves, it really helps us to be more purposeful in our participation.
So this is where we'll help the parents or the school staff complete the written commitment, and we'll help them set personal goals. Again, why we want to use the video, so they can look at the video and help themselves set what goal they want to achieve. The second step is strategy description. And this is where the instructors describe that targeted strategy, like partner-augmented input and its component skills, as well as the method for remembering the steps involved in implementing that strategies. Instructors discuss the impact of implementing the targeted strategy with communication partners and with the individuals who use AAC and or their parents and caregivers.
And this is something that we typically do in an in-service training session. So we might, we can't do the baseline videos, but we can do commitment to training in the in-service. And then we also begin to start describing partner-augmented input as a strategy.
The third step is strategy demonstration. And this is where we'll show the instructor will model the use of the target strategy and its component skills, and we'll give metacognitive explanation of all the steps performed. And when we're training parents or school staff in partner-augmented input, we show a variety of videos in different settings and different activities during this in-service component.
However, we don't limit strategy demonstration to videotape. We also do live strategy demonstration either in the classroom or at home. So the very first thing that we do is we review our partner-augmented input observation tool with the staff member. The observation form is a simple chart that lists the critical behaviors that a staff member or parent should be watching for when watching us model a lesson.
And that sets those expectations. And when we demonstrate an activity in the classroom or at home, we have them watch us or maybe a video of us demonstrating activities. And what Jim Knight talks about is that teachers would prefer that they rather the coaches only model the targeted practice rather than the whole lesson.
So we have the staff member or parent use the observation tool to tally the behaviors that they have observed us doing.
And we'll discuss thoughts and questions.
So just so you can get an idea of what our checklist looks like, here's a copy of it. And we actually use the same checklist for both model lessons and coaching sessions. And we're going to talk more about the elements that are on here when we talk about verbal practice in just a moment.
Step 4, verbal practice. This is where the communication partners practice naming and describing all the steps required to implement that targeted strategy.
Verbal practice of the strategy steps we do, we use the SMORES mnemonic, and SMORES stands for slow rate, model, repeat, respect and reflect, expand and stop. And unfortunately, we don't have time to go fully into detail about those elements today. But using mnemonics has been shown to help with recall. Perhaps you remember learning mnemonics for remembering the planets, or maybe for biological classification of living things, or maybe for some of you speech pathologists out there, you remember the one for the cranial nerves. But each of the ingredients to successful modeling that we discussed corresponds to a letter in the mnemonic SMORES.
And when we're doing, the families and staff members label and they describe each step aloud during the training with guidance from the instructors to confirm that the partners understand the strategies.
The instructors also lead staff through rehearsal. So this is vocal repetition of the strategy steps to aid staff and parents in memorizing the steps involved. And again, rehearsal is something that we know we teach our students when we're trying to teach memory, that saying something over and over again is really a great way to be able to commit that to memory.
And this will come into play when we start doing the coaching. The 5th step is controlled practice. And here, the communication partners practice implementing the targeted strategy in controlled environments with gradual fading of the instructor prompting and feedback. During the in-service part that we do with parents and school staff, generally we will use a communication board, or we'll have those extra devices available. Maybe we'll use emulation software that's available, and we'll participate in a variety of control practice exercise or labs.
And this actually takes up quite a significant portion of our training. I mean, this can actually take over an hour to really just spend time with hands-on practice modeling on a communication device. And there are other ways that we have to help people perform controlled practice. We use fun activities like wordless videos. We have people model along with Simon's cat. There's a link here for those of you who aren't familiar. They're really charming videos that really have great opportunities for modeling language.
Another control practice activity that we use are those wordless picture books. Great opportunity to get them practice modeling the device based on what's going on in the story.
However, again, we don't limit controlled practice to an in-service. We also do controlled practice in the classroom or at home.
And this is where we'll watch that staff member, we'll watch the parents do the same lesson or activity that was modeled.
And we use that same observation tool to tally critical behaviors.
And after that, we'll discuss the observation using those follow-up questions on the partner-augmented input observation tool.
So let's look more closely now at the observation tool. What you'll actually see is that we have all of the critical behaviors that we're looking for in partner-augmented input. So the slow rate, model, respect and reflect, etc., as well as a description of the behavior. And then here on the far right side of the form, we actually tally the number of times that each of those critical elements was observed.
And as we're using the observation tool follow-up questions for our coaching sessions, we'll discuss these questions with that staff member or parents. Again, these were adapted from Jim Knight. And the question might be, how do you think the activity went?
What do you think went really well in the activity?
What are some things that we kind of still need to work on as a team?
So again, really giving an opportunity for that reflection that we talked about.
The next steps is advanced practice. And this is where communication partners practice implementing the targeted strategy in multiple situations within the natural environment with gradual fading of instructor prompting and feedback.
And this is when, this step occurs in home or in the classroom. There really is no way to give this advanced practice in a workshop or in-service type environment.
So this is where we start seeing that coaching aspect. An instructional coach is an on-site professional developer who teaches educators how to use proving teaching methods.
And since the 8-step instructional program developed by Kent-Walsh McNaughton requires coaching of AAC strategies in the classroom, much can be learned by examining the instructional coaching literature. And unfortunately, we do not have time to go into this in depth today. This is something that we cover in our full day workshops, but really there's a wealth of instructional coaching information online. Jim Knight actually has a whole site with streaming videos as well as print resources. So we would strongly encourage you to check out that information.
That next step is the post-test and commitment. And this is where the instructors document and we review communication partners' mastery of the targeted strategy and check performance against that baseline, that pre-test of the communication partner strategy implementation and the communicative participation of individuals who use AAC.
And instructors elicit feedback on the impact of communication partners' implementation of the targeted strategy from the individuals who use AAC and or their parents or caregivers. Instructors assist communication partners in generating goals for the future.
And that last step is generalization. This is where the communication partners practice implementing the target strategy across a wide range of settings and plan for long-term implementation of the strategy.
So this is where we get into some of the evidence behind the practice. There have been a number of studies that have been done looking at this Kent-Walsh McNaughton 8-step model to teach communication partners of those who use AAC. And the first study that we're going to talk about today was done by Kent-Walsh et al. And they used this training protocol to teach parents at a 2-week AAC camp. And they found that use of multi-symbol messages improved.
Another one by Kent-Walsh was used to model to train parents. Again, they instructed families to read books with their children using the RA, read, provide an AAC model, ask the WH question plus provide an AAC model, and answer the WH question plus provide an AAC model. As a result, the positive outcome was that all the children demonstrated increases in communicative turns.
Another similar study was done by Binger et al. And this time they were looking at training educational assistants. And similarly, they found that use of multi-symbol messages improved.
And Senner Mason used this 8-step as well to train educational assistants. And as a result, parent modeling increased and the child's total communicative turns increased.
However, one of the things that we noted when we were reading these studies is that all of the studies, if you look at some of the details in our notes, were focused on a single activity, storybook reading. Now, storybook reading is not something that occurs in every classroom or in every home. And so we wanted to see if we could actually generalize some of this AAC use beyond storybook reading. And also, many of these studies used activity-based communication displays. So the other thing that we wanted to look at was, could this also generalize to modeling being done on a child's existing communication device? So in our first study,
we use this 8-step instructional to train a self-contained classroom teacher, speech language pathologist, and 2 instructional assistants in partner-augmented input. And as a result, all staff increased modeling on the student's speech learning device between that pre and the post-test measures across all activities. And again, the positive outcome of the AAC user was that that student increased frequency of communication and independence.
And in a recent discussion of the study, Allant et al. Note that outcomes of the study extend the research by training school personnel and applying the strategy across activities within a natural classroom environment with minimal disruption to daily routines of the staff involved. This study strengthens and extends the literature by demonstrating that participants from the same context, for example, self-contained classroom, regardless of their backgrounds and experiences, can be beneficial in increasing augmented input of partner across activities.
So some of the things that we noticed from the staff that participated in the study was that they were more familiar and quicker with the devices.
And incidentally, these are things that they reported in themselves. We actually wanted to look at the social validity, so they actually do questionnaires after training, and we give parents questionnaires after training as well. We want to know what families thought about the training, what our staff thought about the training.
And here's some of our things. They explained more to the child. They slowed their speech. They used the device more. They paused more. They were just more relaxed in therapy. They're actually communicating with their students, and I felt like I was better meeting the needs of my student, and more knowledge of the device made it easier to use.
Staff were also asked to note what changes they saw in the student. And so they said, would imitate us. Use the device a little differently, not just when requested. That's huge, right? Not just in response to a prompt, but spontaneously. Stayed with the group longer, was more engaged and excited about activities. He appeared more relaxed, that I was communicating with him in a way that he understood. He paid attention more, and they saw an increase in speech.
And the staffs noted what they liked about the study was that they were using the device more to become more familiar. Skills learned useful throughout the day. They became more familiar with the device. Just that last one about using it more throughout the day, that's what we want to see. They were able to incorporate the device into lessons, so it's being used more. Feedback during the lessons, they liked that piece of us doing the advance and control practice, showing them on the device during the activity. It was a personalized training. There was specific feedback and quick feedback. Again, they really liked that feedback aspect, and they gained knowledge of the device and where things were.
Yeah, actually, it's interesting because prior to training, I sometimes hear that individuals are concerned about the coaching element, that there would be some kind of element of judgment, or that there would be some type of need to be perhaps apprehensive about having someone come in the classroom. And really, when you read more about instructional coaching, it really is it's really a collaboration. And really what ends up happening is that most of the time, most staff really enjoy the feedback because they feel like they learn so much from that opportunity. So very interesting that even in apprehensive staff, sometimes we see that they really feel much more at ease once the training begins.
And if you want reprints of this study, they're available upon request. And just looking at some more evidence behind this practice, the 8-step instructional model was used to instruct 4 parents of children who use AAC to provide partner-augmented input on their children's SGDs during activities frequently occurring at home.
And again, we really wanted to emphasize that these were activities which were occurring naturally in the home environment, naturally and frequently. And what we found is that following the training, all parents demonstrated the ability to perform all of the components of successful modeling, so the SMOREs, as determined by review of the observation checklist completed during the coaching sessions.
And all parents increased modeling on their children's speech generating device between baseline and post-test measures.
And one of the things that was really exciting to us is that the percentage of time the speech generating device was used at home also increased for all of the participants. We lost partial data for one of the participants due to a device crash, but on all the participants, we did see a significant device use following training in the home environment.
And for some of the social validity with this one, there were 7 questions we asked. And with the overall, I believe that PAI has been effective in supporting my child's communication.
I better understand how to provide PAI during regularly occurring activities at home.
I was more familiar with the language on my child's device.
I found this training useful.
I will continue using PAI at home.
I think it would be helpful for other family members to attend this training.
And I use my child's SGD more frequently at home.
And so all of these questions were rated on the Likert type scale. 1 was strongly agree. 1 was strongly disagree, 5 was strongly agree. And all 4 participants rated every single one of these questions a 5, a strongly agree, for all of the questions. So when we used the combined 8 steps to teach families how to incorporate the speech generating device into frequently occurring activities at home, we really saw that families felt that and perceived that this was very beneficial to them.
And again, we asked some things about them, about changes in self. And they said, using the respect and reflection option more. I believe I communicated better with my child when I took that into consideration. We had a great language exchanges then, and often led back to the task we were targeting. But sometimes it didn't. But if I didn't, the conversations that were had on very informative and covered ideas and topics that hadn't been talked about in the past.
Much better proficiency using the device.
I noticed that I'm more confident in using the device and getting using it in general, not just for helping my child request, but also in initiating conversations. And
this last one, it really is a great illustration of that difficulty with some of the long-standing adaptations that families make to communicate with their young children who have communication difficulties. Changes that I started to make and need to continue working on is providing my son with more opportunities to communicate. Over the years, I've gotten so used to speaking for him, asking yes/no questions, and figuring out what he needs without talking, that it's a change of mindset that I need to work on. He has so much he can say, and he knows he can use his device. It's about breaking that barrier to actually have him use it.
Changes that they noted in their child included, my child is taking in the modeling in his own way. It might not look like he is watching or learning, but he is, and it may just take some time for it to show itself.
child feels way more comfortable using the device.
That child is getting more comfortable using the talker, and the child is using it more and more as time goes on. When the child has moments of frustration, when he is having a hard time communicating his needs, he will then independently reach or search for his talker. At times when I'm not getting his attention, when I'm speaking or I feel he is not fully understanding, I will use the talker to repeat what I'm saying, and I will get a reaction such as eye contact, so I feel it helps with him comprehend better.
I have noticed that if I give my son the opportunity with longer pauses and not providing yes/no questions, he uses his device more.
And again, what the parents noted what they liked were that positive environment for learning the process. I appreciate the hands-on approach, getting the chance to see it, and then jump in and try it yourself. I was able to learn more about my child, his interests and dislikes.
Very thorough, gave everyone a better understanding on how to communicate effectively.
The breakdown of different steps in using my son's device for more than just requesting.
I liked the feedback from the sessions that I've received. The training was very good, as before the study, I knew we needed to model the use of AAC for my son, but we focused so much on modeling and using the device ourselves that we didn't give him many opportunities to use it. So some really eye-opening things, but very positive, that when we do communication partner instruction, there are positive benefits to both communication partners and to the children and students that we work with.
We have some resources that we'd like to share. For one, we have a partner-augmented input in the classroom Facebook group. This Facebook group is for speech-language pathologists, educators, AT specialists who are bringing modeling to their classrooms by providing staff instructions and partner-augmented input. The goal of this group is to provide a forum for sharing resources and successes, as well as to provide support for school teams who are facing implementation challenges when serving students using AAC.
We also have a new video resource. This video program takes school staff through portions of steps 1 through 5 of an evidence-based 8-step instructional model specifically for teaching partner-augmented input. This program covers commitment to the instructional program, strategy description, videotape strategy demonstration, verbal practice of the strategy steps, and some controlled practice. The streaming video is available free to schools that are part of the Infinitec Coalition. Infinitec serves school districts in Illinois, Minnesota, Kansas, and parts of Pennsylvania. Those not in states listed above can find out more information about obtaining a DVD by visiting the Technology and Language Center website.
And we also have a guest post on the Practical AAC blog that gives you the resource for the Parallel Talking Lab. This is a link to the article about control practice. In this article, there's a link to a YouTube corresponding to our Parallel Talk Lab for you to explore on your own.
Finally, we have a number of online resources that are also available regarding partner training and partner-augmented input. We have a video, a recently recorded video on our YouTube channel that just goes through strategy description of partner-augmented input. You can find that we have a Pinterest board both on coaching and on partner-augmented input, which might be very useful for those of you. And of course, our websites, Facebook, Twitter. Do stay in touch. We love to hear how people are doing with this type of instruction at home and at school. So I think that brings us to questions. Lisa, do we have any questions for today?
Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. Yes, you do have one right now. It is, I work in a public school and have a few students with SGDs, which they own and take home each night. So when we do trainings after school, there are no devices for the staff to use on their own. Any suggestions for how to best give them controlled practice in this situation?
Well, we do a lot in our school, so there's a few options you can do. For one, you can always contact your rep. If you guys have the Nova Chats or Chat Fusions, you can contact the Saltillo rep. I'm sure they'll give you guys a few extras if you give them a heads up. Also, what we do a lot of times, if we don't have the device itself. We might have an iPad, extra iPad, so we'll use the iPads that have very similar pages. Or since most of the device companies now have free emulation software, like you can get the chat editor from the Saltillo website, you can use that on computers or the smart boards to do the control practice. And in our research study, that's how we had to do it. We didn't have a device for every participant, so we used some of the emulation software. And even sometimes when we had to, we've used low tech on some of the main pages just to get them familiar on that first couple pages. Hopefully that answers your question.
Next question. When modeling with someone who uses auditory scanning with switch, do you model by way of using the switch, or do you use the touch screen? And the same question with eye gaze.
Well, okay, so actually those two things have two different answers. Eye gaze is a form of direct selection, and it is very difficult to be able to model with eye gaze because you have to move the student out of position, and you may have to recalibrate on your eyes depending on how wide apart your eyes are compared to the students, and you'd have to be in the right position. So with eye gaze, rather than trying to keep moving the device back and forth and get it into the appropriate position for eye gaze, we use direct selection to model that. However, for scanning, we really do try to model using the switches as much as we can, because if we do direct selection, the student doesn't always realize where that is on their page or how to get there. And so modeling with switches just affords that child an additional opportunity to see and hear where the vocabulary item is on the page.
Okay, next question. Someone would like to see the partner augmented input observation tool again.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah. So we'll go ahead and flip back to the slide. But basically what we did was we took all of the different components of SMORE: slow rate, model, respect and reflect, repeat, expand, and stop. And we just had a tally next to each one of them. So hopefully we have a lot of slides here that will get to that quickly. There we go. So you'll see that that we have on the left the behavior, so the slow rate, the model, and then on the right we just hash mark. It's a really quick and dirty. Did you see me use slow rate? Did you see me model? Did you see a respect and reflect?
Okay, next question. What to do with preschool kiddos who are also working on engagement when introducing AAC?
Actually, that's a really great point. We have we cited a study at the very beginning of this presentation by Almiral et al., and that was actually done on young children who had autism and use AAC, and they actually found that by using the speech generating device in their sessions and modeling on the device, that they actually saw an increase in joint attention and engagement. And actually, it's interesting, if you look at the staff comments when we asked about what changes they saw in the child during our school staff instruction study, they also had multiple comments that were related to increased engagement. He increased eye contact, he stayed with the group longer. So we do see that when we do modeling on communication devices with young children with autism, that we do get both language benefits as well as nonverbal communication benefits.
Okay, you have another question. A couple people have asked if they can have a copy of your PowerPoint.
I think we did provide all the slides in the handout that we have, so that should be available to you in the handout section.
Yep. And then in addition to that question, did the parents of your recent research have children with autism or other complex communication needs?
Yes, so we had 4 subjects in our study. 2 of them had autism and 2 of them had other complex communication needs.
Any other questions? We have about 5 minutes left. Is there anything you wanted to talk about, how you got started in this process?
Oh, I just saw another question. How many coaching sessions did you provide for families? Yes, I know we didn't have enough time to go through all of the methods and subjects for the family research study, but we initially started the study to do it over the course of a semester. Which was a 12-week-long semester. And with illnesses and other absences, our families had, depending on the family, between 8 to 10 coaching sessions each.
And even in the school-based study, when we did that one, it was a 5-week program, so it was pretty close in terms of coaching. There was really 3 in-classroom coaching sessions that we did per staff member.
However, in the school staff study, we actually did find that when we did follow-up, we did see a decrease. So that just said to us that, you know, some staff, particularly those who are learning this as a new skill, may need a more coaching sessions or a longer duration.
Where we really found the follow-up is really important. And when we kind of walked away too fast, it was, that's where we saw less of it happening after. We saw another question here. How do you handle teachers who are resistant to using AAC in the classroom? That's a sticky situation in a lot of different ways. Generally, what has happened in our district where I work in is a lot of it comes from top down. The administrators all bought into the coaching aspect of AAC. And since, again, we brought in the research to the admin about why we use AAC, but then we also brought in why we do the 8-step instructional program. So that helps it, because what we have done with it is that our administrators also have added it to their walkthrough when they're doing their informals and they're walking into the classrooms. They expect to see that device out. They expect to see the teacher and different staff touching it. So part of it's happened where they know if they're not going to do it, it's going to be reflected on their evaluation. Of course, they can play, yes, I see Matt's here, I'm going to do it now. But part of it is we go ahead and coach. And I think, like Jill said, that even if they're resistant to using it in the classroom, we found when we start doing that coaching and we make it that partnership with them, and we really listen to what they they're concerned about, what they want to try doing it, we get more buy-in with them, because then we're tying it to what they want to do, and we're just adding the technique of the modeling and the AAC in the classroom.
Yeah, I mean, typically in the first coaching session, when we go, I mean, typically in the first session before we ever get to coaching, when we meet teachers, you know, we do try to establish a rapport, find out what their typical day in the classroom looks like, what are their concerns, and try to address those collaboratively.
The next question from Beth was, what was the length of each session?
So the coaching sessions in the classroom were 30 minutes per staff member. So we might be in the classroom for 2 minutes if there were 3 instructional assistants and a teacher. For the parents, they typically participated in a 50-minute clinical hour therapeutic session.
Yeah, we usually keep the coaching sessions in the schools tied to whatever the typical length of the activity is. We don't want to change the practice of the classroom, so we make sure if they're doing the reading for 15-20 minutes, we will use it that period of time. It just might take a few extra sessions to get in what we want.
Okay, examples of the targeted strategies. I think I understand what you mean by that question. You know, one of the things that we've really actively been involved in teaching staff and families is partner-augmented input. So that is the targeted strategy that we typically try to teach staff to use in the classroom, or families to use at home. And again, we have that broken down into component behaviors that we expect to see on our observation tool. And we discuss these in much greater detail in our trainings that are more focused on partner-augmented input.
And if you want to hear more about those, you can even look at our Pinterest page. Like we said, we have a couple of videos that talk about it and other resources. Any other questions?
And with the last minute of our seminar today, I also wanted to remind you, if you are looking for ASHA credit, your ASHA participation form and the instructions are in the materials bar, and you will also receive them in a follow-up email. So they'll need to be turned in within a couple weeks. There is another question.
From Judy. Hi, Judy. As a parent, how do you get the teachers on board? Well, I guess, that's it. It depends on the situation, but I think you would have to go up to administrators. We know that classrooms are always looking for evidence-based practices. So I think you need to bring it to the administrator or at the IEP meeting, go, what are we doing to teach my child how to communicate? So that's where we come into, and like an evidence-based practice we understand is modeling. We also know an evidence-based practice is that coaching aspect. So if they're not using that, that's how I usually get them to start bringing into it, because most of them aren't comfortable. So that's why they might be resistant to doing it anyways, or they might be resistant to do it because they don't understand what the device is. So we tie it back in, we'll come in and do the coaching aspect. And generally, that's when we get everyone on board because they see that power.
Yeah, and when I attend IEPs, I often try to ask for staff instruction in augmentative communication or in partner-augmented input listed in the accommodation. So it's something that we know, if there's a need, is addressed in the legal document.
You just answered my question. How do you get started? That was part of it. Okay. Many thanks to you from many of your attendees. Any other questions before we end this session? It's the top of the hour now.
Well, we just really want to thank Saltillo for the opportunity to speak with you today, and thank everybody for attending. It was really a pleasure. If anybody has any questions that arise after the session, please do feel free to reach out to us.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Matt and Jill. It was amazing.
Thank you.